Okay, I am live with Scott Fawcett from Decades. Second appearance, Scott. So very, very always happy to have you on, and you have an open invitation whenever you want to come. So thanks for carving out some time again.
Very nice. Absolutely. Thanks for going a little bit earlier for me. I appreciate it.
Anytime. So we were having a great conversation before we went live on a number of different topics. But we might as well just keep rolling with that. But one thing we were talking about was that seems to be the latest craze as far as the coaching side of the business that everybody's been watching is short game and chipping, and what Victor Hovland is doing, and with the help of Joe Mayo, and is completely changing the paradigm, or at least to a large extent, on what a lot of people are thinking you have to do it with short game. And I know you've had some posts on Instagram lately with your chipping and controlling distance. So I guess we'll just jump right in and right into the short game.
Well, it's interesting because if you ever asked me like what was my strengths and weaknesses as a playing professional, I would definitely have always said my weaknesses were clearly chipping and putting. But I was a huge subscriber. Like I read that Nicholas quote of like, if you hit it good enough, you just don't need the chipping. Just doesn't matter that much. I read that when I was young, and I probably oversubscribed to it because I was like, it's a pretty damn good point. Like nobody, like I know there are guys like Brian Gay and whoever that chip it just amazing, but for the most part your up and down rate is almost explicitly tied to how hard is the shot. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
really very rarely do you get that Rory McIlroy super spinner where it actually works and you chip it inside of 8 feet, which is where I consider like it to materially matter. And so over the last few years, like I've tried to get myself as I turned 50 this year, like trying to get my game back in shape. And I hate saying it, I really just don't enjoy practicing my short game. Like it's just not fun. And so the idea of like, you just go grind over there for 4 hours multiple times a week. Again, there's like the whole saying that people are like, well, how bad do you want it? I'm like, ice baths and chipping for 4 hours a couple times a week. I don't want it that bad. So I've tried an ice bath. I get it. I'm sure I would feel much better if I did them, but I do not want it bad enough. I hate cold.
Yeah,
Chipping's
that's
kind of
heavy.
the
You want to have that bad. I do those, and I almost don't have a choice with the back issues I have. And I know you've had your physical, but you
oh,
definitely have to want to do that.
I bought, and we'll see how this one goes. I started to buy the cold plunge a month or two ago, and I was like, let's just wait till the winter. I'll use my pool as a test case. And I bought. I'm embarrassed to admit this on to open public, but I bought just a Speedo wetsuit. That's really the only thing that I've got a problem with. The rest of it, like it's cold, but it's not that big of a deal. And I'm like, I don't want it enough for just below the belly button to like mid thigh to be miserable. Anyway, so the chipping, I played in this good tournament, and you can go to Ben Haddon Golf on YouTube, and you'll find one of his most recent videos. It's like 4 practice secrets with Scott Fawcett or something like that, and I talk about it in there. I went out and I got a short game lesson with Derek Dominski, who is Golf Better
Mm-hmm.
Tucson on all the social medias, and
He's got
he
some
works with Homa,
crazy
and
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
he got
guy's
great
really good.
stuff.
And I was going out there because I was playing in this good event in Phoenix. So I buzzed down to Tucson to work with him. And I was so excited because I was like, finally, like somebody, I've worked with Como and a bunch of really good instructors, but I wouldn't consider any of them to be like short game experts. Like I'm a really good athlete. If you just tell me what to do, I can probably do it. And so I just don't feel like I've ever been armed with the right knowledge. Well, then he tells me like, 10 minutes in, he's like, I really don't mind your chip shot. I'm like, dang it. I really was hoping you would be like, oh, you obviously need to do X, Y, or Z. But then he said, just carry a shot 7 yards for me. And I just don't have a reference point for what that means. I just always chip it to the hole. Like I kind of know where I'm going to land it, but it's never been like my focus. And he said so matter of factly, like, oh, you just have to know a shot that you carry 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15 yards. Like those numbers just come up constantly. And they do. Like I will full on admit they come up all the time. And so what I figured out is like for me to just hit like what I feel is the softest chip shot ever, not something ridiculous with the face wide open where I'm really just trying to like carry it a foot, but like just the shortest I can have a normal chipping motion is going to carry 5 yards. And it literally just feels like I'm flicking it with my hands, like no
Mm-hmm.
arm movement whatsoever. And so I just sat there for like 20 minutes one day, just owning that shot to where like I just carry this thing 5 yards every single time. And then I added what feels like in my head, it's just let the hands travel a little bit. So it's like maybe 6 inches of my hands traveling, and then everything else is identical. And that goes about 7 yards, and then about 12 inches. I'm making up those numbers, but there's just a little bit more travel all the way. And then I've got this inflection point of right around 15 yards where it goes from feeling like a chip shot to now it's starting to feel like I would consider a pitch shot. Again, there is a subtle difference in, I think, how most people would define a chip shot and a pitch shot. And so that's right around 15 yards for me. And then I've got it all the way up that I can work out to about 25 yards in these 2 to 5 yard increments. And what's crazy then is I'm basically, for every chip shot I've hit this year in practice and everything, I'm not chipping to something. I'm just trying to work on the carry number. And then I guess it's probably because I've played enough golf in my life. Again, I'm a 50-year-old who's been around the professional game in some capacity for a long time. So I feel like that's a unique advantage I don't know that a younger person has, but I
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see the shot that needs to happen. And so then I just pace it to that spot. And then I literally start. If I decide I want to carry this 11 yards, my chip shots consist of, okay, 5, 5, 7, 9, 11. And then I just step in and go and replicate. And I just, it's literally comical how as I've been nursing these injuries for 2 months now, like I literally have not hit a practice chip shot. And I swear to you, I went out there over the weekend and hit him for the first time. And I was nailing my yard, my distance carry, I would say on average within a half a yard, like pretty consistently. And I'm like, that would have taken me months to like get my short game to where it feels back in shape. But the other thing we were talking about is once you kind of understand the worse the lie gets, meaning like off of hard pan, like a tight-ish type lie or into the grain, the higher you put the handle, the more you turn your putter, the lie angle into like that of a putter instead of a 60 degree. And then you start doing the same thing. So now you're kind of rounding out the toe, which is all that's coming into. So it's kind of like it has an aerodynamic leading edge. And it just that's something Zalatoris showed me probably 2 years ago. He and I were just out chipping and screwing around. And I was like, how would you do this? He's like, oh, dude, I would have that handle. I would have that shaft like basically vertical. And I just was like, okay. And then I couldn't miss hit this shot. Like I literally kept hitting it from this just awful lie. And I just kept making the lie worse. And so it's like you've got this high handle, and then you're trying to feel like you're slapping the bounce of the toe underneath the ball. And then once you know the carry distances, again, what I will be transparent on is where I've been practicing at PJ Frisco, like they have no rough at all. It's all collection areas,
Hmm.
but it's Bermuda. So I've been in my head like, well, you're not going to find a harder lie to chip out of, which is true, but I definitely don't have a good feel right now for how to chip out of rough. I mean, that's definitely going to be one of the main things I try to figure out how to work on over the next 2 months leading into the Champions Tour Q School. But all I can tell you is like screwing around whatever your own version is of these little 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15 yard carries. And then solely, again, you wouldn't, now let's pretend you're however many yards off the green. Well, you wouldn't want to try to make your carry number be the fringe. You want to carry it like a yard onto the green. So your miss hit, even if carrying it a yard on the green is going to make the ball go 8 feet by, you want your miss hits to be the ones that land in the fringe and go to 2 feet. Yeah. You want the shot like, damn it, I actually hit it good. But you didn't know you were going to hit it good. Again, we have a shot pattern in chip shots and putting, just like we do in approach shot strategy and tee shot strategy. And so once you start picking the right landing spots, I mean, I've been stunned at how good my short game has been all year with as little as I've technically practiced it and the way I've practiced it, which is not hitting a single chip shot at a single hole. I mean, again, like I always just try to get people to understand like I'm not saying this is right for everyone. I'm just telling you, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to play the Champions Tour. So I'm not screwing around and just seeing what works. I'm trying to do what I think is the most effective thing for me. And since I'm not a unicorn, I bet it's pretty effective for a bunch of other people as well.
As I followed you now for a couple of years, and I've been amazed, and I found out myself as I told you before we came, I didn't touch a club for almost 3 years. Not even, I did not step foot on a golf course for that amount of time, outside to maybe go watch buddies playing a tournament. And my game came back relatively quickly because I would get sick of sitting on the sofa watching TV, and I have a little kids club, and I would just make motions super slow and just, okay, here's where it needs to go, or where I think it needs to go. And when I came back, I mean, I was breaking 80. Like I thought I was going to be struggling to break 90, but I've been amazed at your game as I watch and follow that you're able to play at a very high level with a limited amount of time that you either play or practice. So is it that you have made when you do practice extremely efficient, like you said, with the chipping, and then I would assume as you do your speed training?
I truly think I've just simplified this game so much. I truly believe that now that I only hit a cut, Like, in under no circumstance whatsoever, aside from a tree, would I try to hit a draw. And that's including off the tee. So, where I played the Texas Open this year, the 17th hole at Cascades and Tyler's kind of a dumb hole. You have to hit basically a snap hook with a 3-wood. I carry mini driver. So I basically have to hit like a 30-yard hook with a mini driver. But that's the only shot I tried to draw in 72 holes. I tried to draw it every single day off the tee. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because people all the time are just like, you'll never be any good with that. I'm like, well, I shot 64 in the first round as a 50-year-old amateur. I had the lead against, yeah, it's a Texas Open, but there was, I'm going to assume, 10 guys with Korn Ferry status there. There's a number of guys I've worked with there. And it was pretty cool that first round to have a little Scott Fawcett with an A next to it. There were 3 of us tied for the lead. Luckily, I posted first, so I was at the dead top because it had to just be like, hey, guys, I'm right here. Now, I shoot 64, 72, 69, 67, finished 20th in the Texas State Open as a 50-year-old amateur who doesn't play much golf. And I do firmly believe that that's because of only being able to do one thing. I can only cut the ball. I mean, yes, I will occasionally double cross it, but as long as I can get the ball somewhere in the middle of the face, I kind of know what distance it's going to go, and I kind of know what direction and shape it's going to be. And again, I firmly believe that by having the ability to work it both ways is what allows your game to introduce more extreme double crosses. So, and again, this is Tiger. I don't care who it is off the tee. You're going to double cross it 25, 30% of the time when you go against whatever your stock shot is. And so now, again, for me, that's a fade. So now if I were to try to draw a driver, 1 in 4 at best, definitely 1 in 5 at best, I'm going to double cross, which by definition now I've started it right and I've hit a block cut.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes your shot. But when you see these shot patterns that I post sometimes from ShotLink that are 100 plus yards wide off the tee, that's because of double crosses. There's no chances if all the players stood on the tee and hit whatever their stock shot is, the shot pattern, I truly believe the shot patterns would be 30+% smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, there's just a number of times where this just doesn't set up for me. The pin's in the back left, whatever it is. Like, I've got a 6-9, the pin's in the back left. Well, I bet you the scoring average is 3.2 or 3 in that setting for me. Just making par is just an absolutely incredible result. And there's a chance I will just happen to pull it. I'll still get some birdie looks, but for the most part, like, flaring a 6-iron onto the green from 190, again, I'm saying this half tongue-in-cheek as a +6 handicap, but like, it's not that hard to do, unless the green is tiny. And if the green is tiny, again, by definition, the scoring average is going to go up. And so once you stop trying to be so perfect, what we were talking about before, and have all the shots, I do believe that the 9-box drill that Tiger introduced to the world, I do think it's one of the most destructive things you can play, you can do in practice. And everybody says, well, it helps keep your swing in balance. How about this? If you start hitting a 30-yard cut, try to cut it less. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to work it the other way to keep my swing in balance. I don't do it. And again, it doesn't really get out of whack to where I'm just all of a sudden going, 15 degrees left and hitting a 30-yard cut with a 6-iron. Like, that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on that, because again, there just are some certain talking points that I've just refused to let go. And the driver working at one direction is one of them. So the driver is the only club in the bag that we specifically fit for a certain shape. When you're sitting in a simulator, hitting balls, getting a driver fit, they're not saying hit all the shapes, hit your shot. So if you're a fader, I can get a driver. Again, like, the idea that a draw goes further historically than a fade is only because it comes off with less spin. No matter what you're doing, if you draw a club versus fade a club, the same club, the draw is going to have less spin. So historically, when we had spin rates that were way too high, the draws would go further because it was 1,000-ish RPMs less, I bet. That's a huge, huge difference. Well, if I can fit a driver to go at 21 or 200 RPMs in a 15-degree launch, well, if I try to take that driver and draw it, it's going to drop to 1,500 or less. Right. It's going to be a knuckleball that falls out of the sky. The flip side is, if I try to draw, if I'm a drawer of the driver like Bryson, and now all of a sudden he's going to fit it for 21 or 2,200 RPMs in a 15-degree launch or whatever his ball speeds are optimal. Now, if he tries to fade it, he's going to tack on 800 to 1,000 RPM.
Mhm.
He's basically turned it almost into his 3-wood, just hit 3-wood. I mean, again, that's one thing that Scheffler said at the Masters when they asked him, like, why are you not just hitting driver on 10? And I was just like, Jesus, do we have to go through this again? Because it's easier to draw 3-wood. But he did not say it's easier to draw 3-wood. He said, if I try to draw my driver, the spin drops too much. It doesn't carry. It doesn't go anywhere. And I was like, I had literally never thought of that fact. I had said it's the only club we fit for a shape, but I'd never really finished the thought experiment of why that matters. And it's because the spin rates are going to change. And you cannot have that club be fit optimally for both shapes. It is not going to happen.
No, I realize that as my brother is I don't know what his title is for Cobra and Puma. I guess it's they're setting up a mobile fitting program, and he did that at PXG for 7 years. So
Nice.
they brought him on. But so I was out hitting his new stuff, and I had always been, high spin with my driver, and I could never get it down. So I, of course, took the low spin driver out, and I'm getting 11 and a half to 12 and a half launch, but the spin is down 1,800, 1,900. He goes, you'll pick up 15 yards if you get more spin. So he gave me the higher spinning, and I'm like, how did that happen? I mean, did they change him that much? He said, no, you're 51 now. You're swinging about 7 miles an hour slower than you used to. So get that back up, and your spin rate's going to jump back up, so we can switch.
That's what's amazing, though, is anytime you ever have heard anyone say, oh my God, this new driver is amazing, I picked up blank yardage. No, your old driver sucked. The new driver isn't amazing. We have had ball speeds and smash factors and CORs and whatever other sciencey term you want to throw out there. That's been capped for a long time. The only way to pick up speed, and this is why I argue with the architecture community so much, because they think that speed is just going to compound to infinity. I truly do believe that and I know this is a silly thing to say, but like 190, 95 mile an hour ball speed, that's as fast as you're going to see played on tour. At some point, the ball's just going too far. The college event that I'm going out to watch today is at Shady Oaks here in Dallas, and I got to play there 6 months ago, something like that, with James Hart Dupree. He was this 6'9", 270-pound South African that literally has 200 plus mile an hour ball speeds. And he hit a couple. I mean, he hit number 10 is 380 something. He drove it into a 10 mile an hour wind. I literally hammered I've got mid 170s ball speed. I hammered my drive and had a flighty pitching wedge left. He was putting. I mean, it's like nothing you've ever seen in your entire life. But there were 2 or 3 shots where it was like, it wasn't that bad of a shot, but it was this low spin knuckleball that wound up 6 fairways over, because it's like, coming out at 200 and 4 degrees offline and kind of knuckling offline. It's like, I think that 195 is about the highest you can go and get those spin rates and launch and everything super consistent to where, you just can't have even once around, let alone twice around, where it wasn't really the shot. It was just the equipment can't handle what you just put on it. And it just knuckles off in this weird way. Because again, we just can't be perfect. We cannot do all of that perfectly to where you are forced to hit with the exact same launch, attack, spin, everything. You can't do it at those speeds.
No, there's a local kid I played in the match play in the semifinals here, and Evan, he's at Congaree, great kid, and he's cruising in the low 180s ball speed, and he says I think he said he peaked at 192. But when he got offline, and when we played Harbortown for the semis and the finals, the local, and I mean he got offline. You could, I mean, and he's a very good player. He just hadn't played, and I played. I think I was 3 under through 12, so I played pretty good and closed him out early. But he had it going sideways on that course. It's you're done. I mean, he was punching out, and he again, he's a great player. But that course is set up.
The first however many years I was teaching this, people would always their one gotcha for me was like, okay, well, how are you going to tell your players to play Harbortown? I'm like, I'm going to tell them to skip it. It's a stupid course. Like, it's a great course. It's a fun course. It's not a modern tour event course. It's a showcase of yesteryear that we do a couple times a year. I'm trying to think of where another one. I'm sure there's other similar-ish courses, but not
Colonial. Isn't Colonial
is similar? Yeah. Yeah, but it's not like, it still isn't like Harbortown. Harbortown feels like it's cut through houses or condos and stuff also where there's out of bounds.
It's opened up more than it used to be.
Yeah.
because I mean, I haven't played there in 10 years, and before that, probably 7 years before that. But I moved here in '92, so I remember playing it when it was really tight and there was overhanging branches and you had to work stuff around. Now you can pretty. The Hurricane Matthew did some damage to Harbor Town. They
Mm,
lost like nine. Nine was a perfect example. There was two very tall pines right down by the green,
sure.
probably 30 yards short of the green. That if you didn't hit it between there, or if you were on too far on the edges of the fairway, you had to cut a wedge to get to the
Yeah.
pin. Now that with those gone, you just beat it down there and.
Firestone is a perfect example that I did my senior British Open qualifier at the Fazio course at Firestone. But as we were walking from the putting green over to the 10th tee, like you could see 18, which is, that historic hole where Tiger stuffed it with all this.
Mm-hmm.
And literally Harrison Frazier told me, he's like, they can't even use the back pin in there anymore because the two trees in front have become, as we're walking, I'm like, there's like 9 yards between the canopies. And he's like, they literally cannot even use the pins were basically in the dead front right of the green every single day. And I'm like, God, it's so weird because I can't imagine taking those trees down or the ones on 9 at Harbor Town. But at some point, okay, this has just gotten stupid. Like,
Yeah,
take
it's
one of them
much
out.
more open. Harbor Town is a completely different golf course than it was 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
10's another example. It goes around the lake, but they lost all the trees up around the green. It's wide open. I remember you had to, 20 years ago, you're hitting cut or a 6-iron in there, and it's usually into the wind, and you got to thread it through the trees. And if you don't, you're 30 yard. You hit one, you're 30 yards short. So it's different. But I know what you're saying. It's not the
Yeah.
modern golf as we've come to know.
Modern golf, we get on that one. I mean, that's again, like, that's all this width and angles and everything where it's just like, that's just not how it works. Shot patterns are too big for the way courses have been designed for the last 10 years to do what the architects intended of like, well, we've gave you a 70-yard fairway so you can pick a side. Well, my shot pattern's 70-yard wide. I'm probably not better not try to pick a side of the fairway because you let the variance within your shot pattern get that angle. But for the most part, whatever is 71 yards offline to the right, like it's usually a hazard or something. And that's, again, the exact way PGA Frisco is here. They're trying to give you tons of room. So you favor a side, but then it goes straight to some sort of pretty penal hazard. Again, that's what Kiowa is for 18 straight holes. Like
Mm-hmm.
you aim at the dead center of the fairway. And then as a result, you literally never miss a fairway. But you don't get the angles as much, but you can always just put 7-iron on the green, 2 putt it for par, wait for the par 5s and short par 4s and shoot a billion under. I mean, again, that's my handicap dropped to +6 this summer, and it was largely from playing mainly at PGA Frisco, where the course rating is 76 and change.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I get it if you're like a 5 or higher handicap, but I drive the ball pretty well. Like I can literally go weeks without missing a fairway out there. And at some point, like, yeah, it's long, but I can reach the par 5s. There's 2 drivable par 4s. Like shooting in the 60s every single day on a course with a 76 course rating. And I'm like, something just doesn't feel right about this. And that's essentially what it was. If you're never in rough and you're never in penalty areas, it's not that hard of a game.
You for being we're basically the same age, and your ball speeds, and when that whole discussion in golf was going on about a year, 2 years ago, roughly, you were posting with, I think it was an old Strata golf ball you had and some older clubs that your smash factor, and your distance was still pretty high, but you still swing it pretty fast for somebody who's could play the senior tour. Do you, as far as keeping your game in shape, you I think you have done speed training. You obviously had some surgeries and you've been out, but do you think it seems to be, as I look, and Marty Jertson's coming on in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about the stack and the
Oh,
putting
nice.
stack and all those things. And Sasha's been on twice, but from what I'm seeing is people posting that the speed training is actually helping their directional control as well. I don't know if it's
100%.
so.
I mean,
You can obviously speak to that since you've been doing it for a long time. And as I asked earlier, how do you keep your game in shape if you're only doing some basic stuff and you're doing some speed training? My theory is that it helps. It's got to help.
You can't swing a club fast and out of plane. I hate saying that. That's probably the wrong way of saying it. But like the faster the golf club is going, the more the engineering from guys like Marty and Sasha can help you. Like that was the whole point of the Nike Sumo, the square driver, was that the square was going to help straighten out, with some physics. It's club face, and I believe that was the point. But there's definitely something. Again, I don't ever want to discuss physics. That is not my area of expertise. But there's definitely something to just getting out of your own head and way. I mean, most people, I do believe most people have 20 to 30 yards with just any effort whatsoever. I mean, if you've never speed trained, again, you want to make sure you're doing it intelligently. When Bryson won, obviously Bryson was the second player that I worked with back when he was an amateur, after Zalatoris. And when he won the US Open in 2020, I mean, I've never seen a more obvious thing that was going to happen in my life. Again, I can show people the text messages with Como and I. I'm like, if he sticks to this game plan, like at the PGA that Morikawa won, Bryson was dropping back to 3-wood too often. And
Mm-hmm.
so after the tournament, I'm like, to Como, I'm making this whole numbers up, but I'm like, look, dude, if it was a driver on 6, it's a driver on 13, but he dropped back on 13 again, like making up those whole numbers for whatever that course was in Lake Merced or whatever it is, Olympic. And going into the US Open at Wingfoot, I was like, it's a driver on every single hole. But I didn't clarify one thing. I said that the shape doesn't bother him. I should have specifically said it's a driver on every hole except 2 and 8, because both of those dogleg right, and he's trying to draw the ball. He gets up there, and even on 2 and 8, I'm like, well, at least he hit driver. Like he hit it everywhere. Like that's better than dropping back too much, except for the fact on the 2 holes. But those are the only holes that he hit bad drives on because it was just the wrong club.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody, after he won that, I was like, I cannot. The next 5 to 10 years on the PGA Tour are just going to be glorious. Watching everybody just try to swing harder. And what they didn't realize was Bryson had been doing 6 or 9 months of pretty in-depth body work to get his body ready to handle the swing speeds. And then we go into this pandemic shutdown right as it's starting to like, wow, he's getting big and he's really putting on some speed. And then the whole world stops for like 4 minutes and he goes into hiding and just is like, well, let's take this up a notch. We got nothing else to do. And so then when it comes back, the first start being at Colonial, actually, Como and I went over there to walk around and watch. And it was just like, oh my God. Like I've saw him hit balls in Como's living room, but when it's going into a net and you're just looking, wow, that's 198 miles an hour. You don't really see it until you're standing on 11T, which is a wide open 660 yard par 4. And it's like, he just carried it 20 past the second longest drive of the day, which was Brooks in the fairway. Bryson carried it into the left rough, 20 past where Brooks had hit it with roll and everything. And again, once he won the US Open, I'm like, everybody's going to screw this up. I was surprised Rory was the first to do it. He literally came out like 3 months later after driving it for me. He was like, I just started trying to swing hard. And it's like, that's what I said you're going to do wrong. It's not about that. The point being, like, to the people listening is like, you've got to do some work on your body, get your joints, your ligaments, your flexibility, your range of motion, your strength, get all of that ready as you start doing some speed stick training, just swinging a heavier stick. And then after 2 to 4 months, then start actively trying to swing it harder. Start letting your lead foot release a little bit up and come up in the backswing. And then you're trying to slam that lead foot down to then come up into the, through the downswing and follow through. Everyone has 20 or 30 yards in under 6 months that they can pick up. I mean, again, like there's just some of the numbers like John Sherman and some other guys are posting where it's like, wow, you are a small dude that bunted it. And now he's getting ball speeds in the 170s. And that's flying. That's PGA Tour average for a not big dude that's plus 1 or 2 handicap, whatever he is.
Yeah,
I
I've got
mean,
Lee Cox is coming on next week. Do you know Lee?
I
He's
know
from
the
the
name. I don't
UK.
know who he is, though.
He's from the UK. He's Martin. Believe he's Martin Borgmeyer's swing coach.
How's
But
his last name spelled?
I think it's COX, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. But he's coming on, and I got connected to him through John Tattersall because John did a local coaching seminar where
Love him.
he said that what all the force plates and he's got the medical grade. I don't know what that means. The difference between that and I'm not a techie by any means. So
They're probably dual force plates, so they're not measuring just one or the other in conjunction, and then they're probably really souped up.
But yeah, John and Lee, I watched them do their talk, and they said that there is more of a lateral component in to hit the ball further than there is rotational or vertical. And
It's going
And
to be highly player specific because, like me personally, and I don't. It's because of my elbows. I've gotten to this habit where I slide around too much
mhm.
because I'm trying to shallow my swing. I didn't realize that's what I'm doing, but I'm trying to shallow my swing out. If you stay pretty centered, you're going to be hitting more down on it. But so for me, I actually can get my most club head speed by feeling like I'm almost like stacking and tilting because then I'm able to use the power of my left leg coming up. So I should not even be saying this because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I've only hit balls on cone with force plates a few times, but like my laterals were too high, which was taking away from my verticals. And once I get my laterals down a little, then my verticals went up 150% for a net
Mhm.
gain. And again, I'm literally making it up out of my ass, but that's approximately correct. One other problem with like some of these force plates, though, like Como specifically, because Bryson has hit so many balls off of them, he has the GASP ones, GASP dual force plates, but Bryson's hit so many balls off of them that you can do vertical jumps on them because you're just jumping. But once like they just feel like ice to me
Hmm.
for swings because he's worn all of the carpet and everything off the top. And so I literally like I can't come close to getting my max clubhead speed on Como's force plates because I just my right foot slips so much if I do. It's pretty weird to be perfectly honest. He needs to get some new plates.
I'm going to talk to Marty about possibly modifying the algorithm on the stack for older guys because it was hard for me when I started it. They sent me one last year and I had started it and got about 6 weeks in, but I don't know if I just wasn't strong enough yet. But my back couldn't handle it because I hadn't played in so long. I couldn't do it 3 days a week.
That's the whole that's your problem more than anything. I mean, so like I personally my skin sucks. So I have never been a winter golfer. So even like while I was playing professionally and certainly while I haven't been, when the winter would start changing, so if I'd miss it Q school, I'd pretty much would not play for like 3 or 4 months. This year I missed it at first stage of Q school, Corn Ferry Q school last year. God knows why I entered that as a 49-year-old amateur, but missed by a shot at first stage. And what's funny is as I was telling my playing partners on the 18th hole, I had a 25 footer for eagle. And I'm like, what's crazy is if I make this, I'll get through. And I thought a two putt might still have a chance. But like if I make this, I'm through for sure. And I will wake up tomorrow with more excitement to go play golf than I've ever had. And if I miss this, I won't touch my clubs until March. Like the juxtaposition of it is crazy. But when I would always come back, I would take the first 2 weeks and I would just hit chippy wedges and everything through like 9 iron. I would really get like my flexibility, but then I would also just when working out have like a painter's rod behind my shoulders to try to keep
Mhm.
my back flexible. Be doing like a weighted club where you're spinning it around it, in your arm. Because and that's the one thing I've really been cognizant of over the last 2 months is I haven't played golf at all. Is once I start again, I'm going to have between 6 and 8 weeks to get ready for Q school. It's going to entirely be a function of how quickly can I get my body flexible to be able to handle speeds. And I was really excited yesterday. It was a range ball, granted, but I did have 175-mile-an-hour ball speed with a full swing driver. I was worried that was going to be closer to the high 160s,
Mhm.
and they would take me the full 2 months to get back to 175 and just being able to be right there again, literally without having hit a full driver in months. But I've been working really hard on my body, and that's again, it's hard to do because it feels so tedious. But that's how you're able to not hurt yourself. I mean,
Ye-
again, that's the deal is you're so prone to hurt yourself, especially as most of us 50-year-olds are a little overweight and a little not in the best shape, especially in the back. And then all of a sudden you start trying to swing hard.
Mhm.
There's a lot that can go wrong really quickly.
Michael Carroll is fit for golf. If everyone knows who he
Sure.
is, he was one of the first episodes. I think he was like the 6th or 7th episode, and we had a discussion on that. And someone I'm sure is going to chime in on this and say, "No, you're wrong," and here's what it really is. But basically, and I'll put that in quotes. Basically, what happens when you do build up the soft tissue, it takes the governor off the brain to say, okay, you can step on it because you're not. We can go to this level because you're not going to hurt yourself. But we're
Yeah.
not going to crest this level unless that soft tissue is able to hold position and not let the bones move and all those other fun things. So you're not going to hurt yourself if you lift.
But that is amazing. Like the brain, like I always felt like that was one of these hokey sounding things. Like the brain has all these action maps and it's got a governor on it. And it's like, oh, it definitely does. The brain is
Mhm.
protecting you at all times because again, like, it's just amazing what the human body is capable of doing. If like when something gets electrocuted and jumps 30 feet in the air, that wasn't the electricity shooting them. That's the muscles contracting and being like, get away from that. Um, and that's where, well, it's funny is my left foot, my left ankle is definitely the one that I've been like, I'm concerned about. And so I've flared my left toe more. I've hit balls like 2 or 3 times now in the last week and a half. I flared my left toe more to give myself more room to go into it. But even yesterday, as I was hitting those first drivers, like, there was no pain whatsoever. But as I was coming into that ankle, my body intuitively just like jumped around it.
Mhm.
Like, it was not a conscious thought. It was not pain. It was just like my brain just knows something's not right down there. And so it wasn't going to let me like roll onto the lead foot, like Nicholas or somebody really rolling that thing over, or even just putting the torque posting into it, and coming in with, I guess, would be external rotation, maybe, whatever that is, throughout the entire lead leg. Like, it just, my brain was like, nope, you can hit a full 7-iron, dude. I'm not going to let you hit a driver hard. And that's back to the rehab I've been doing. Just this week, the guy had me doing for the first time. We put cones probably like 6 or 8 feet apart in like a zigzaggy pattern. And so I was jumping from one to the other one. And so I would have to land 6 feet away on my right foot, and it would be wanting to roll out, but the right foot's no injury, like, it'd be solid. And then when I would jump to the left, it didn't hurt, but it was just like the whole body was just like protecting it. And then pushing off, like, the lack of power relative. But if I sit there and just do calf raises, the foot is just as strong.
Mhm.
But the distance I could jump off of it was, I mean, literally 50% as much. I
Yeah,
just couldn't do anything.
that stuff shuts down. I've had enough injuries and dealt with back in particular for so long. I mean, that stuff shuts down, and then you get compensatory muscles making up for what the hurt one can't do. So now when you're coming out of that, it's like, okay, how do I get these to turn off and this one to turn back on because it's been shut off for so long? And
Yep.
and then you get tightness, and because some muscles are doing work that they're not designed to do, and then you got to kind of get those worked out so that the other one can start firing the way it's supposed to. But I guess like in knees and ankles, because I used to play basketball when I was a kid, and played for a long time. But flossing now, I'm like, where was flossing when I was a kid? Because I bet I've sprained each ankle 7 times. Wrapping it and then moving it through full range of motion to get the blood in there, to the coagulated blood to flush out, and the new blood to get in there, to nutrients
So
and all that.
I lived in college with a point guard for A&M's basketball team. He was right there in the same athletic dorm. So we would go over quite often and play in the Coliseum at night. And that's actually halfway through my 4th year of school at A&M. I destroyed my ankle. I gave this guy a head fake that I was like, oh my God, he bit it. That he had enough time to land and come from behind and stuff me, but he brought me down so hard. Remember those old canvas ankle braces? Like, I literally
Mm-hmm.
tore the eyelets out of one. That's how hard this guy destroyed my leg. And I didn't have health insurance or anything, so I didn't get anything taken care of. And when I just did the MRI on the ankle a couple months ago, uh, one of the notes was clearly significant trauma from a previous injury. And I was like, yeah, I figured that was going to come back to bite me in the ass at some point in my life. And apparently now is the time, because it was like, I probably didn't do anything wrong when I heard it this time. My body was just like, ooh, something's not right from this other scar tissue and trauma. And it made me use my ankle in a way that didn't make sense given where I was walking.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it tore another muscle in it again. Like, I think it would be, there's so many things that would be cool to see in 100, 200, 300 years, like what we figured out. It'd be so cool to know what part of what we're thinking about physiology is correct right now, and what part is obviously not correct in a couple hundred years, once we have just obviously better science and stuff. Because
God, it's
just the
going
way the
so
brains,
fast. What's going to be here in 5 to 10 years?
oh,
I
I
mean,
mean,
you know what I
it's just,
mean?
it's funny is that I was listening to this other podcast. This is not golf related at all, but the guy was talking about, he's like, I mean, I figure we've got about 4,000 years of inventions left, because at some point we do just run into the upper bounds of physics. Like, I had always just assumed we'll have Jetsons flying cars at some point. And they were talking about this, and the guy's like, there's not a chance we will. The only way, you have to get them airborne somehow. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take a jet or propellers. And I was on Joe Rogan, because actually Joe Rogan's like, what about magnets? He's like, you're just going to lay magnets everywhere? Like, that's not how it's going to be for sure. And I was just like, I really always figured we would, but that makes total sense. At some point, the car's got to get in the air somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And just at some point, we are going to have pretty much everything discovered or invented. But I just think that the brain, it's bonkers that the brain is so much more powerful than any computer, but obviously it just can't recall. It's not as correct as an efficient, but the fact that we don't have a clue how it actually works is really weird.
Yes.
Sam Harris has got a great saying where he says, he's like, I spend a ridiculous amount of time thinking about the human brain, and it almost never occurs to me that I have one. I'm just like, yeah, that's pretty freaking accurate.
You mentioned Harris, and we talked, I think, about Tony Robbins, and you've gone to a number of his seminars, and
Sure.
we're talking about trying to be perfect in playing golf, which was my eventual downfall. But you've been very forthcoming on social media with working on yourself and mental things. Is there anything that you've been doing lately that has made a change for you that set you on a better path, that you feel improvement the same way that you improve your chipping or your swing speed?
Yeah. I mean, and this is actually the first place I've ever said this because it just happened within the last 2 weeks. I had a deal where my daughter, my 14-year-old, was basically being assaulted at a park at school, and I mean, it was bonkers what was going on in the last 3 minutes as I'm driving down just to pick her up from a church function at school, and I got there, and this kid, and when I pulled up, these boys, like five of them ran. And
Mm-hmm.
there's another group of five girls that were sitting around. Two were on the ground crying. The other three were then like huddled up. And I was just like, what's going on here? And when the boys ran, like that's an admission of guilt to me.
Yeah.
And one of them circled back around, and I proceeded to just grill this kid because I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, like this 8th grade bullshit stops now. My response, considering what I thought was going on, I felt was right in line. But it was enough that it like really made me think over the next 48 hours about like personally, like maybe you've noticed I can get into some bites on social media, but there has definitely been too many times where I've just kind of like blacked out, if you will, especially with USGA officials. Like that's the one to me that is just so obvious where I've lost my mind on these old, retired lawyers where they're just, again, I hate saying it, but for the majority of them, I hate making blanket statements and down, pooing all the USGA officials, but the most part, they just want to get in there and mix it up and argue. They miss arguing in their daily life. And I'm the wrong guy because I'm like, I don't understand why we have a bunch of amateurs running the sport. Like you don't understand. I've forgotten more about how to play golf than y'all even know. And sure, you know the rules better than me, but I know the basic rules pretty damn well. I've lost my mind on some of these guys in the past. And it's just, so that's something that I don't know that I've ever realized has definitely been a problem of mine. And so I will say, like, over the last 2 weeks, I've done some soul searching, some reflection, a lot of journaling. And it's like, well, the thing I would tell people is like, sometimes maybe you just need to sit. I mean, again, like sometimes just sitting down for an hour, like we all just get so busy just living our lives and just take an hour and just sit down and just think, and don't feel like you have to write everything down that you're thinking, oh shit, that's the best idea ever. I don't want to forget that one. Like, but if there's something about whatever it is you're trying to meditate on or journal on, like, again, for me, it was like, is this a problem? And the just overwhelming answer is like, yeah, like you should probably chill out in a number of different situations. And like some clarity that I've received on that over the last 2 weeks has been really amazing. And again, like I've said a number of times, I was the biggest hothead in golf. That was one of the funniest things whenever Tron and I were arguing, the guy from No Laying Up, he's like, well, I've talked to players who said you're a psychopath back in the day. I'm like, like, maybe you've listened to me on my podcast because I've said that 72,000 times. Like, if you think that that's going to upset me that you say that, like, yeah, it was absurd. But just anyone, again, like I am a huge Tony Robbins fan, but it's like I literally went back to find the Matrix because I was like, there was a saying there, and it's like there's a difference between knowing the way and walking the path or something like that. That it's like if you aren't doing it, you just know it. You're not actually living it, and there's been a number of different things. The prime example being my 14-year-old is kind of wearing me out right now. Love you, Emma, if you happen to listen to this golf podcast, but I would have turned it off a while ago if I were you. But
hey, what 14 girl doesn't wear you out with her
oh
dad?
man, I mean, this one is, she is exceptional at it though. But what I tell my players whenever they have a tough event or a tough or a good event, I'm like, journal the good, journal what your routine was for the week. How did you handle any adversity? What, like, something bad happened, I guarantee you. Why did it not piss you off this week? What was that inner conversation like? What was your routine like leading into the round? Because maybe that set the tone for you. And then in a bad event, what would you have done differently? And I want you to sit down for 20 or 30 minutes and journal this stuff. And then I want you to condense that into bullet points that you can fit on like a 4x6 note card, 3x5 note card that you can laminate and put in your yardage book. And for the time being, while we're trying to build some new habits on the first and 10th tee, every single day, I want you to read those. So you're trying to, before you start warming up on the first tee and 10th tee. And then if there's ever a spot during the round where you're like, feel like I'm getting pretty pissed off right here, or whatever your, personal Vietnam is, pull that card out and read it. And what I've decided for myself personally is my first and 10th tee need to be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then any other time that I'm getting pissed off at, most likely my 14-year-old. And so I journaled literally like 50 pages over a 2-day period. And then I condensed all of that down into something. And I've actually turned it just into like a 5-minute, like not meditation, but just voice clip where like I'm trying to listen to it several times a day. And it's like, I've already kind of got it memorized. But that's the point then, is to just don't feel like you've got it. Keep hammering the same thing. It's been a great week and a half for me now. And I am curious to see, like, 3 months from now, how do I feel? Have I made an actual material change or not? Again, people say all the time, like, wisdom is the ability to take your own advice. Like, what would you tell your friend if they had all the information you have about whatever it is you're doing? What would you tell them? Because it's pretty obvious typically. Like, psychology is extraordinary common sense, but just like decade is common sense, it is, but nobody does it. And figuring out what it is you need to do to make some changes you need to make. Like, again, I think that's the most important thing. I get more excitement out of the emails I receive from people saying I've helped them more as a human than as a player. Like, that makes me happier than anything by a mile. And it's again, I try to be honest. Like, I screw a lot of stuff up, and it's not fun or flattering to have to go onto a podcast and be like, yeah, boy, I screwed this one up pretty good. Again, I will justify it. And they had not thought these kids had been actively, like, throwing a football and hitting my daughter hard enough and chasing her around. Like, I'm sure it was stupid flirting that 8th graders don't know what the hell they're doing, but it was too much. But I also didn't need to make the exclamation point and illustrate. The whole idea is like putting space between stimulus and response. I mean, again, I know that's a pretty cliche soundbite, but it really is the truth. As I was driving down there, my ex-wife was like, something's going on. I'm on the phone with her. So I had like a 3-minute period of like, all right, dude, you're probably about to pull up on a weird scene. Don't lose your mind. And from my moment I got out of the car and those boys ran, I had space between stimulus and response. Stimulus, something's going wrong. My response is going to be 3 minutes away. To all of a sudden, now I had a new stimulus of these boys ran away. I got girls on the ground crying. I just pulled up to an active crime scene. Like, what the hell is going on? So now my stimulus, my space went to 0. And that's where I needed to be mature enough to put a little bit more space back in. Again, I'm going to say these boys were so far out of line, it's ridiculous, but also it was probably just stupid flirting. Again, our brain really is so wired for fight or flight. But in modern society, we never actually have fight or flight is like someone's about to die and get eaten. Like, that's
there's real reason.
Yes. No one's clearly about to die here. So that response is not appropriate to this stimulus. And again, I'm really interested to see how I do over the next couple months. I really feel like a different person right now. We'll see.
I think, you have, you said you used to blow up when you were playing, and you've had some known conversations, we'll call them, on when you were on Twitter that went back and forth. But I give you all the credit in the world. But let's, for those that knock you, they don't come back after you say, hey, look, here's what I was wrong. Here's what I'm working on, because I admit that I have this issue. Now, here's what I'm doing to fix it. Not many people would throw that out there, and you have a very large platform. Whatever people follow you through decade and the very good work that you've done with tour players and everybody. So you have a big following, and I'm sure there's going to be that, I call it that small 3%, that no matter what you do, there's going to be a roaming 3% that just try to tear somebody down, the trolls. But I have said many times that people said, well, Fawcett's this, and I said, hey, let me see you go on a thousands of people following you, or tens of thousands, or even more across the spectrum, probably hundreds of thousands, and admit some of your faults out there, and then go ahead and find a way to make a correction, that to improve yourself. Let me see you do that instead of just going to work every day, punching your time clock 9 to 5, and going home and sitting on the sofa watching TV. If you're going to put yourself out there, at least as you have done, make the effort to say, here's where I was wrong, here's what I'm doing to improve it. Hey, everybody, maybe this will help you too. That you got, I give you all the credit in the world for doing that.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Again, like it definitely. I hate it when like actors say, "Oh, you've really humbled me," but like I try to humble myself here by saying, like, dude, I've done a lot of really good stuff in my life, and I've done a lot of really bad stuff in my life. And what I was trying to explain to my 14-year-old over the weekend, I'm literally like, look, buddy, I would give anything to be. I was trying to make her watch this podcast with Rich Roll and Albert C. Brooks. It's an amazing podcast. It's on Rich Roll's podcast. Albert C. Brooks just had a book come out with Oprah, basically talking about, it's shoot, I got it right here. It is build build the life your way by Arthur. Build the life you want. And again, my daughter's definitely having some issues with being bullied right now, and I'm just like, I have spent 50 years just whatever comes my way, not like living a life by design. Like, where do I want to be in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I'm always trying to improve myself, but I've never just sat down and specifically said, here's what I want to be doing. Now, the last 10 years have been pretty wheels off with double murder suicides and COVID and just all kinds of crap. But I think the one thing that this new generation has is just some honest conversations like this. Like, hey, I would have done this differently. And to get a young kid who still doesn't have a functioning brain to be like, oh, I have a choice in this, say, like, I don't have to just be. There was a podcast I did with, God dang it, a tour player. He was having a great year. He was like 8th in the FedEx Cup at the time. He was normally a guy that's barely keeping his cards. And this was through Phoenix. So it was like 4 months into the season. Like, it wasn't just like he was doing well. Mark Hubbard. He was doing well. And I was like, what's different? He's like, honestly, I just realized that I was just being led around like a puppet tied to my results. And I just decided I was tired and I didn't want to do that anymore. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible, because like I've had that feeling, but I never had the maturity at a younger age to be like, well, I don't want to keep doing this. I want to do this
Mm-hmm.
differently. And that's where, like, trying to explain to my daughter, again, all these are just corny cliches, but I just like using them over and over and over again to explain, like, oh, I've heard that before. Didn't really think about what it means. But the idea that you're going to experience one of two pains, the pain of regret or the pain of discipline. One of those two is going to happen. And so, Emma, my daughter, you can either have some disciplined work right now. Let's go through the work pages in this book. Let's listen to this podcast together. I'll pause it every 10 minutes and explain what the brain terms mean. Like, let's put some work in on making some changes, because again, and again, like, it's not going to be fun. But has the last 2 years of your life been any fun whatsoever, as you just keep getting in all these stupid little fights in school? And like, obviously teenagers are idiots. We are right in the middle of that wheelhouse here.
Mm-hmm.
But we're either going to be in pain, just continuing to suffer the same. Oh shit, that happened again. That's weird. Like, oh, you did the same thing and you got the same results. That's weird. Or we can have a little bit of pain of discipline, a little bit of pain of journaling, a little bit of pain of trying to figure out what changes we can make to foster a different outcome. I mean, again, that's so obvious. It's ridiculous. I'm a 50-year-old man who's had multiple very successful companies that I've owned and operated, like started, owned, and operated. And I never knew that. So again, it can't be common sense. I've done really well in life in spite of some of these things. But if you can just get out of your own way in some of them and put in a little work in constructive paths, you can really avoid a lot of headaches.
Yeah, as you last time we talked, and I had said that through caddying since I was 11, and playing and seeing guys fire at pins back in 2000 and 2001 and 2006 when I played. And just understanding that that wasn't it. And, it took me 9 years to figure out how to do course discipline, which is actually very, very similar to what decade is. I just didn't fire at enough pins when I was in shorter range. I made it too basic, as you described last time you were on. But to sit back, as you said, to either journal or to give some conscious thought to your life in general. And you usually do come up, if you do it enough or do it consistently, you usually do come up with, well, why am I doing this? You'll start to see your own pattern, that I keep running into this wall, or I keep making the same mistake because it's the, whatever reason. It could be most comfortable.
Maybe we
It
should
could
make a
be,
left turn here next time.
yes. And as you said numerous times, or you've had play, I think, Burns, when Burns came to you in that summer and changed inside, I just made the same mistake 3 days in a row. I'm all in. And then he went on and had the great, he turned pro, and then he's done what, 30 million since.
Well, the story that you're saying is, I worked with Sam when he was a junior and world #1, and when he went off to LSU his freshman year, and he called me that Christmas. He's like, I've got to play more aggressive than this to win at this level. I'm like, you don't, but I'm not going to try to talk you out of that. You need to go see it for yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to constantly be having doubt. But just call me back if you need anything. I'm not offended. Hit me up if you need me. And he played a little bit better that spring, but it still wasn't great. And then he called me in like July that summer, and he's like, dude, I've done the same thing 3 straight weeks. Like, I get it now. It's probably one of those pedantic Tiger 5 mistakes where he's trying to force a sand wedge or something. And here's a guy that basically had to go down his own path of trying to force it, and then just realize, that's not it either. And what he said specifically was, if I didn't know what you teach, I don't even think I would have noticed the mistakes. But it was like, after it happened the first week, he's like, oh, God, I know better than that. And then he said the second week, he's like, this is the same situation. Like, I know better than this. But he's like, but I'm feeling it. And he did it again. And then he said the third week, he's like, okay, this is exactly like the last 2, but now I'm due. And he did the same thing. And it's like, holy shit, man. Like, that's incredible that a player as good as he was. So then he did flip a switch overnight. That is what the greats do, is he's like, okay, now I see it. That didn't work. And the guy, again, he does great work with Brett McCabe and everyone else on his team now. But it's so funny to me listening. Like, I actually feel like I've got it right here on my desktop. There was a quote when he won his first event. Oh, dang it. It basically was like, I just realized that I don't have to be perfect. I got to find this quote. Hold on. I'm going to search it right here on my this thing real quick, because it's just amazing to be like, I thought it would come up on my desktop. Never mind. It was basically something along the lines of, I just realized I don't need to be perfect to win out here. And I'm like, that is literally exactly all we talked about through college and your years on the Korn Ferry Tour. But he needed to get out there and do the same mistakes, most likely in some sort of a different scale on tour. And again, Brett McCabe's one of the best in the business. I'm sure then they were having a conversation just like, dude, you just don't have to be perfect like this in order to win. Just trust it, that last 9 holes. And that's, again, I do try to use all these names of guys that I've worked with to add efficacy, not to seem cool, but to the listeners, just like, this is what these young players are doing. Doc Redman was a perfect example of this in 2017. We're standing on the putting green during the practice rounds of the USAM at Riviera. And he had just lost the week before in the finals of the Western Am. And we were just talking like, what happened? He's like, dude, I was down. I just started trying to force things. And next thing you know, I make a few mistakes and now I have no chance. Like, I just didn't play the patient, disciplined golf that like Decade would prescribe. And we talked about, a lot of winning requires luck, is just happening to have the right shots hit at the right time. And like, that's just numbers. That's like, you can hit on 18 in blackjack. There's a 23% chance you won't bust. There's still a 30% chance you won't win the hand. Like, that's insane. Like, so much of it is out of your control, even when you do great things. And luckily for him, then he's going down. He's getting beat in the last 9 holes at Riviera in the finals to Doug Gim. And he said he just was thinking about the conversation. Like, dude, if it's my week, a putt's going to drop, a shot's going to happen. Like, don't give him any holes. I cannot afford to give him a hole. Rather than I need to win a hole, it was, I can't afford to give him a hole either right here.
Right.
And sure enough, he made like a 30 footer, I think, on 17 or 18 or something like that. And then Doug made a double on the first playoff hole, number 10 at Riviera, which is obviously comical because it's such a stupid hole. Um, but there it is. Like, here's a guy that just luckily just happened to have it go wrong the week before and learned his lesson. And that's why he's great. He was open to, yeah, I did do that wrong. Again, to finish that idea off with him, again, it is just interesting how these conversations tie together differently so often. When I caddied for Doc, so now let's go to 2018. He asked me to come caddy for him in Tiger's event, Quicken in DC. And he's in like 25th place or something through the first 2 rounds. And the reason he asked me to come, he's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong out here, but I'm not even making cuts. Like, I don't know what's wrong. Will you come caddy for me? Like, yeah. So go up there and he makes a cut. He's in good shape. And I had said to him on the range before, I'm like, I know we want to get to the top 10 to get into next week, but that's just going to be solid play. There's nothing we can do to force that. Very first hole, the pin's up about 4 yards from the right edge. It's 100 degrees and dead calm. And he hits a shot that from the sound, the swing, the bounce, and the follow through, the shape of the shot in the air, like this was not a bad golf shot. And it was right in the middle of the bunker. Right. And I was like, my target, I told him, was like 5 yards left of the pin. I'm like, the shot he hit should have been about 2 yards right of the pin. It was very well within just like, yeah, there's a solid shot. But this thing instead was in the middle of the bunker. And I just, if it had been Zalatoris, I'd been like, there's no chance you actually tried to hit that ball where I told you to. You were firing right at that pin, weren't you? And Will had been like, yeah. I didn't really know Doc well enough to just call him on it on the first hole, because there's a fine line between pissing your player off and then just shutting down on you. Finally, we get up there around the green, and I'm like, all right, dude, I got to ask you, like, were you actually trying to hit that thing 5 yards left of the pin, or were you firing right at the flag? It's totally cool either way, but I just want to emphasize, I don't think you were hitting that shot where I wanted to based on, again, the contact, everything else about the shot. And he's like, no, I was firing right at the pin. I'm like, okay, cool. Will you do me a favor and not do that again? I'm like, and right here, because the way it landed in the bunker and kicked to the right, like, I was like, you're screwed here. We're at best having 15 feet back. Just put it 15 feet and let's just have a putt, probably make bogey and move on. And then he gets over the bunker shot and just contact was good. Everything was great. Sound was good. Right in the lip of the bunker. And I'm like, there's no chance you tried to carry that thing where I told you to, did you? And he's like, nope. Okay, dude, you're still screwed. This one's going 15 feet by. And it did. And he made the 15-footer coming back. And it's just like, it's so hard to not try to force things. Like, that's, again, I don't disagree. Decade is common sense. And here's a tour player with me on the bag, totally screwing it up. It's so hard to do. It's honestly almost comical. But that's why they don't just hand out millions and millions of dollars. The greats are great because they can do this at will. Like, this is what Tiger did at will.
Mm-hmm. As I was, it's ironic that you were coming on today. A couple of days ago, I was listening, I was scrolling through Instagram or Twitter or something, and Tom Ballou, I think I said his name right, Impact Theory. I don't know if you follow him at all. But yeah. he had his own, he wasn't talking to somebody, he had his own, short 30-second speech. And he was saying almost all the time that we make mistakes, it's because our decisions in that instant are emotion driven and not just common. I don't, he didn't use common sense. He just used, you knew what you're supposed to do, but your emotions overrode your game plan or what you had said you were going to do or whatever it was. It just said, well, in this instance, this will be better. And I used to teach at a local college here to a golf class. And one year it was almost, I think it was all guys. And I opened up with it, and it was football seasons in the fall, of course. And I said, how many of you guys bet on football? And they're all kind of hesitant. I said, I'm not going to rat you out. Just raise your hand. How many play football or do the betting, college and NFL? And of course, 90-some% of them raise their hand. I said, okay, if you could be 70 to 80% right on your picks every week, would that be a good thing? And they're all like, oh, that'd be great. I'd love it. I said, okay, when you're on the golf course and you have a putt, a line, a shot to green, why do you change your mind once you stand over the ball? And they looked at each other like, holy shit, we do it all the time. Like, exactly. And I said, I played at a very high level and I still do it to this day. I know it's wrong. But I do make that mistake. So it just seemed, I don't know if it's a human error, human flaw, or emotions just
Emotions,
run away with you, and
emotions.
you it's a knee jerk reaction, but you're right. The people who stick to it in the most it, difficult situations for what they're doing, golf, if you're in a tournament, a member guest, or in a am or a tour event, that emotion overruns you, and it's like I'm going to do this instead, and just it is hard to stick to it. And you're right. The best, or the people who seem to do the best, stick to that plan.
I mean, again, I've day traded my retirement accounts for almost 15 years now. And it's comical how much poker, golf, stock trading, it's all the same emotion. So where again, I was a lunatic in my 20s, and I was definitely better in my 30s when I went back and played professional again, but I still wasn't good. I hadn't found out about stoicism and meditation and all these other tools yet. But I was better simply because of studying poker in depth. Like, yes, I'm good at math, but I'd never really thought about how to apply mathematical ideas to golf at the time. But now I was thinking of golf as a straight up poker game. And the reason I bring up stock trading is the first couple of years a trader is doing things like they're gonna lose, like
Mm-hmm.
just period. And trading a fake account, a sim account, is not anything close to doing the real thing with real money. And I was having this conversation with a guy that I was learning from. I was like, what's amazing is if I could just take the exact opposite entry, like if I'm losing on 70% of my trades right now, if I could just do the opposite, I would be in such better shape. He's like, what's amazing is if you took, so instead of going long, you went short, or instead of going short, you went long. If you did the exact opposite, which would mean that theoretically this trade is going to go from a loser to a winner. Like if a coin flip, if you lose a coin flip, you're like, well, if I'd said heads, I would have won. Like, obviously. But he's like, you could take the opposite entry of every single trade and you would still do just as bad. And I'm like, how's that possible? Because it's not the entry that you're screwing up, it's getting shaken from the trade, because the emotion of watching you make and lose money is too much. And I'm like, that's bonkers if you think about. And again, I have no idea if that statement is accurate or not, but the more that I thought about it, I firmly believe it is accurate that you could give a losing trader the exact opposite entry and they would do exactly the same amount bad. And again, golf then is just so the exact same thing. It's honestly just insane.
There was 25 years ago, I worked at a local club here, Old Tabby Links. It's on Spring Island. It's one of the wealthiest clubs in the state. I think Kia was number one, but if you took the size of Spring Island, per capita is probably the highest in the state. And back then it had all the retired, or most of the retired guys from the New York Stock Exchange. The president of the Philadelphia Exchange was there. The COO of Procter and Gamble was there, and I used to play a lot of golf with him. And he was, those other fellas respected him so much because he was a self-taught investor. He invested his own money. So I used to go sit with him, and I didn't know shit about investing, and I still don't. And I don't even claim to say I know. But he used to tell me he had about 3 to 5 criteria, and I could butcher this, but I think he said for him to invest in a company, he goes, my old company isn't worth, Procter and Gamble is not worth investing in because they're so big they can't grow. So his criteria was something along the lines of a company has to show at least 3 years of, I believe it was like 7 to 10% growth per year if they're past startup phase and in their growth stage. If you're looking to make money, there was a certain P ratio that it had to have, and there was one or two others. And he said, if you follow these things, if you're going to get into investing, you follow these 3 to 5 criteria, you will do exceptionally well. And I
Yeah.
thought, and not knowing anything, I thought that, okay, that's pretty simple. I could do that because someone tells me to do something and I believe in what they're telling me. Decade being one, as I message you, a little I played this year to start to come back. I played really well as far as where I place after not having played for so long. But I thought those things, that seems pretty interesting. And I've talked to some friends who are in it. Oh, that's, those guys are trading tens and hundreds of millions. That's a different league. I'm like, but aren't the principles the same? Whether you're trading $500 or 500,000, 5 million,
there's some pretty simple formulas for how to trade the S&P 500. It's exactly like you just said. You get rid of like the 20 largest caps because like they're just not going to keep compounding at whatever percent.
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point, it's a cycle. You get rid of the ones with any negative earnings whatsoever in the last like 3 years. Again, I don't remember. There's some criteria that you can search pretty easily. And it's like if you do these things and you do it with bankroll management, to steal another poker term, like You don't go all in on one stock. I mean, like there's ways. I hate saying it, but I've done it for 15 years. It's not that hard to beat the S&P. I do wonder once you start trading other people's money, or you start doing it at scale, like having a few $1,000 swing a day doesn't really bug me. But if you started doing it at a bigger scale where it's 50 to $80,000 a day, like but it's the same thing. The trade is the trade.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just watching this thing just like a hurricane of money in and out, like I feel like it'd be a lot harder.
I'll tell you a funny
Uh,
story about investing. And of course, I'm sure many have the similar stories. So my girlfriend comes home. This is, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years ago. And I had gotten home early. So I'm just sitting there scrolling, getting ready for dinner, scrolling TV or whatever it was. And she comes home and she's just pissed off. Like, and finally, after about 15 minutes, her complaining, I said, "What is your problem?" And she said, "Well, you didn't watch the news today." I said, "No." So I turned it on, and this was when Bitcoin went to 17, I think 17,000. You know, it taken, or maybe it was 11. It gone from nothing to thousands. And I said, "Okay, what the hell's a Bitcoin?" And she said, "Well, don't you remember a couple years ago when I had that $7,500 left after taxes? I was going to put in this penny stock." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "That was Bitcoin." So of course, what do I do? I get the calculator out. I'm like, okay, uh, 15 cents or whatever, or 50 cents a share times 10,000 or $7,500 times 17,000. Holy shit, you'd be worth $400 million. I'd be playing golf every day. She said, "That's why I'm pissed off." Not, of course, everyone says, well, she would have sold at X amount and cashed in on this, but
that's
still,
the whole deal.
yeah.
Like
When do you
you
hit
just
the cash register?
exactly, and that's what most people like. Because even I remember when it hit like 100, everyone's like, "This is ridiculous,"
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, "Oh, really?" Wait till you see what's over that mountain coming. Like but again, that's one of the first arguments I got into with an announcer. I won't say which one it was, but he was just texting me. He's like, "What you're missing is you always talk about playing golf without emotion. What you're missing is I played better when I was emotional. Like if you put me near the lead on Sunday, I did good." And I'm like, I actually was the same way. Like if you put me in 40th, I don't know how I didn't connect the dots. Like, Scott, you're broke. You should try to grind out an extra $300 here today. Like, I just was too pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
What I said to that guy's like, no, you can't play better than you are. You just played worse than you were when you weren't engaged. I know that's what it is because that's what I did. You you can't say I play better than I am when I'm emotional. No, that's how good you are. You just need to figure out how to get in that state every day. And I would highly doubt it was as air quotes emotional as you think it was. You were just more engaged and focused. Like you can't make a more optimal decision than optimal. Like just because all of a sudden you're emotional, like it can only cloud your judgment. And
Well,
I firmly believe that. And it's a talking point that pisses off a lot of the old guard former tour players. But like,
Well, part of my theory on that is because you see it more at the higher levels than and lower level. 15 handicap, and the guy I can't remember, the Barstool guy. I think that you did the 30-minute that's on
Frankie,
your website. Yeah. So
yeah.
people, everybody, I recommend getting on Scott's website, and we'll have the link in the description, the summary. But something like that where they're all over the place. But I think that the higher level of the player, as you talked about, Redmond, that he's going to try to hit this shot. You're right. It's wrong fundamentally and scientifically that they shouldn't do that. But I think that the better the player is that they think they can do, or they've done something like that, whether it was emotional driven or not. And it's like they can ramp up the focus to hit a particular shot. But it's like how long can you run in the red? Especially, and I
Well,
think
that's the whole deal.
for
You
golf
just, you
tournaments are 4
can't.
days, and you can't. It's not possible. I've only learned the lesson about a million times, and I keep doing the same thing, which is why I'm so excited. And when we, today, now that I actually spent a year, like, okay, I'm going to try to play in some Carolinas senior stuff and maybe a few senior qualifiers, that I'm going to get the decade, because I think I get my emotions, I've noticed as I play this year, they jump up and way down, as most people's do. But sticking to that, to something that I'm gonna do this no matter how high the pressure gets. And I think the decade for me is a great thing, as well as many. They're like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Now I've never been a fire at pins. So I said it a lot, that I agree with your system wholeheartedly. In fact, I probably need to fire with lower irons at more pins based off your system, and not closer to the middle of the green.
Well, and I don't think that I realized just the mental energy that is required to think and play good golf. Like it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at any of the US Am or Mid Am stuff, you're going to play multiple 36 hole days and you're going to play a lot of golf. You've got to, again, like people talk about like decision fatigue, like you only have enough bandwidth to make a certain amount of decisions every day. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it certainly makes sense. And I definitely know that towards the end of a round of golf, you're getting more and more tired. And I do think that, again, like what Stuart Sink said after he won his second event in 7 months after buying it, he's like, it just helps me with decision making because I don't really have to make decisions anymore. On the course, the system makes the decision for us. It takes the mental energy that would be required to deliberate and make a decision like that, and it makes the decision for us. It keeps me fresh. It's pretty simple, and I like using it. Like, I don't think that I understood the "it keeps us fresh" part because I personally have not played that much golf in the last 10 years. But now when you think about me caddying 100+ rounds for Zalatoris over the his amateur career in the summers in the US Am and a couple other events each summer I would go to, he didn't have to think at all. He just had to walk and swing. And I would tell him what to do on every single shot and walk and swing and walk and swing. And so he's staying super fresh. I was smoked by the end of every round, but I don't need to be energetic. Like I'm just, a 45-year-old dude that's just, thank God I don't have to hit a shot right now because I am exhausted. But this kid is now obviously pretty talented, and he is able to stay the most physically fresh because he's not even had to make any decisions at all. I'm making the most optimal decisions. Like it just wasn't even a fair fight. And I really do believe that it was not a fair fight. And I do believe that's how Tiger had to feel quite often when he was playing even on the PGA Tour. Like, because there were times I would be listening to our opponent in a match and their caddy or whatever talk about a shot. And I'm like, that's not the one. And I just would kind of be laughing like, this isn't fair. That's so stupid. And the fact this caddy or whoever is letting him even entertain that is crazy. And I do think that Tiger had to have a very similar feel on tour, listening to some of the stuff guys were trying, just like, what are you doing? Like, that's not it at all.
You know what it's done for me is it's for someone who didn't play much junior golf, and I didn't play in college. I was always out on interns doing other things, but so I and then when I turned pro, I always thought that I had to make up what other guys had gained, and there was always what am I missing? There's an indecision, not 100% commitment. So what Decade has done for me in just the free version that I've utilized is it's eliminated that little bit of doubt. Is like, am I doing this correctly? Yeah, okay, aim here. Where I used to, when you're self-teaching at a high level, it's very difficult. You're not certain until you have the success, and then you can get it. Like Tiger said, winning his early on in his career with the first Masters he won was huge for his confidence, and winning always does that. And I didn't win until late, but Decade for me has eliminated that doubt that this is what you need to do, and you don't have to worry if you flare one and you're 30 feet instead of hitting it 10. But for me, it's
I do believe
speaking of
that
mental freshness.
the outlier shots are either you were trying to work the ball the opposite of your stock shot and double crossed it. You weren't totally focused and committed to what you were trying to do, or amazingly often, you didn't even know what you were trying to do. You were just hitting a shot. Or, I mean, just basically just a lack of attention. I mean, just that's it. So what you're saying there is like exactly correct. I think that all of our really bad shots come from we just weren't quite paying attention, we just weren't quite focused, or we probably chose the wrong shot to be trying to hit, which I feel like most people would look at that and be like, well, that's easy to say after the fact. It's like, well, if I also said it before the fact, if you're trying to shape it the other way, this is going to go wrong at some point. Then it's not saying it after the fact. I get it. It feels like it is, but I could tell you before you tried to draw that Scott shot, there's a pretty decent chance you screw this up. Then it's the discipline to not try that shot. I mean, and again, that's where it is super frustrating when I have to argue with, I mean, again, a guy like Marty Jurtson, he's made the cut in the PGA Championship. That dude can flat out play. And having to argue with him about, and again, I'm actually not as against the ping thing where they want you trying to hit zeroed out straight balls because they go further.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making a concession that having a little bit of shape, a predictability of shape. So yes, any shape is going to go shorter than a straight ball, but even their computer models show that the attempted straight ball has a wider shot pattern. They're just saying that width the extra distance offsets that extra width. I just think, and again, I don't believe that either one of us can unilaterally prove we're right. I don't think this is something, because you would have, I would have to go for the next 9 months and try to hit it straight and see, does that work for me? Well, after 9 months, be like, well, damn it, that didn't work. Well, now I can't even find my fade
No,
again.
now you got to
Like,
go back. Now you're
I don't
lost.
think it's something we can perfectly test. We can't have a cohort of 100 guys try to hit it straight and 100 do the 9-box drill. Like, it's not going to be good science no matter what. There's way too many confounding variables. So I do think for a lot of listeners, some of it is listening to a guy like Marty and a guy like myself explain, here's our position. And then you make a decision what you feel like you're capable for yourself. But now you're at least aware of, here's two opposing ideas. And I would say, like, Marty is not, let's try to draw and fade the driver. He's, let's try to hit it straight. So we have now fit the driver for straight. So we've removed one of the problems that I've discussed with trying to shape it both ways. So I think Marty and I are a lot closer to each other than someone like Michael Finney, who thinks you should work the driver all over the place. Like, that's just dumb. I mean, there's just no chance that's correct. Sorry, Mike. But I want the people at home to not beat their head into the wall for 15 years when the answer is, maybe it's just really simple. Just stop trying to do so much.
Yeah, there's
That
not
is,
many Phil Mickelsons out there. He's a generational type talent, and I've run through my head a million times. It's like, well, if Decade was around 30 years ago, if Phil followed it, would he have won more, or would he have gotten, for him, bored in hitting it? It seems like he gets a lot of joy and emotional fun out of playing, with the excitement of hitting the career shot, I'll call it. And it's not for him a career, because he's obviously hit him a lot of times, but it's like, to back up a little bit on that, I wholeheartedly said, watching the U.S. Open at Winged Foot, I mean, here you got a guy that was arguably the best wedge player in the world, distance wedges at the time. And when he hit that flare on 18, I said, why isn't, when he tried to hit that 4-iron cut, I said, why not just punch it in the fairway? At worst, he's going to make bogey if he wedges, but he's the best wedge player on the PGA Tour right now, given all the work he had done with Pels at that time. At worst, you're going to be in a playoff, and you might just knock it stiff and make it. But Mickelson is the one that I look at and say, it for me, and as you said, there's no way to probably measure it. It's like, if he would have done a decade,
you'll never know the counterfactual. I mean, there's
exactly.
no way to know.
No way to know.
But the thing that I will say is, I've gone through ShotLink in a number of his wins, and it's not as crazy as you think. I mean, I do think that he wears his aggression like a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the machismo of Brad Faxon saying he doesn't fear the comebacker. Well, okay, that's fine, but it's not what you did. You did not have to mark your comeback putt. That's not based in reality. And so I just want people to see, like, no, Faxon left far more putts short than you would even think. Definitely far more than Faxon even thinks. We have data. This isn't something debatable anymore. Like, that's just not what you did, Brad. And I would throw Mickelson into that boat probably too, of, well, he talks about being aggressive, and obviously he might have a bit of a game problem. So he's clearly got a problem. But the wins I've looked at, and I probably went through 20 of his wins by hand, and so this might just be cherry picking, but when he won, it looked pretty decadey. I mean, again, so this is where sometimes you can be firing. The way I used to say it with Decade, I haven't thought about this in forever, but there's 3 ways you can win. And let me see if I can even get these right anymore. We're picking our Decade target that's usually going to be just generically a few yards towards the middle of the green. So I can win it with solid ball striking by hitting it to my target quite often and solid putting. I can win by actually missing it. Like, so now that's, if we've got our shot pattern skewed 50-50 left and right of our directional target, I'm going to hit the right amount of greens. I'm going to hit the right amount of shots close. I'm going to avoid the right amount of bogeys. I can also win by having like a 60-40 skew away from the hole. So like, my proximity sucked this week, but I hit a ton of greens in regulation. I 2-putted a ton, and I played the par 5s well. I won. And I can also have a win by having a 60-40 skew towards the pin. And so now I actually just had a strokes gained approach that was just off the charts this week, but technically that player had the exact same target in all of them. Just instead of being 50-50 left and right in any given week, it's usually not going to be more than 60-40 skewed one way. There's just not enough attempts.
Hmm.
But it's easy if we had 100 attempts to have 60 of them be right of our ultimate target and 40 be left of our ultimate target. And then the interaction of those can be like, man, I got a little lucky this week. The times I was aiming left of the pin, I just happened to miss it right a couple of times extra. And the times I was aiming right of the pin, I just happened to miss it left a couple times extra. If I said that correctly, I think people know what I'm talking about. Like there's ways that just you're setting up all these different ways that the math can serve you. But more than anything, I'm going to finish 15th a whole bunch. This is like when people are losing their mind about Zalatoris. He went on this run where he just finished in the top 10 on every tour for like 18 straight months.
Hmm.
No offense, Will, with that putting. And it's like, yeah, he's a stripe show, but he understands how to navigate that shot pattern around the course because nobody hits it good enough that they can just aim at pins.
No.
That's the one main thing that we changed with him overnight in junior golf to college golf was we're going to stop trying to make birdies with our approach shots, and we're going to worry about making pars with our approach shots, letting variance create the birdies, and most likely they're going to be on the par fives, but we're going to drop our bogey rate in half, and we're going to probably leave our birdie rate about the same, which that's what's funny is, I mean, again, his bogey rate literally drove effectively 90% of his improvement overnight. Just stopped making so many bogeys. And he stopped making so many bogeys because he was trying to make birdies with his approach shots, which meant he missed an extra 2 or 3 greens around, which meant he had an extra 2 or 3 10-footers on average, which meant he made 2 extra bogeys around. Just stop doing those.
You know, I had Bubba Kruger, who's the FootJoy tour rep, on the show. Bubba's a friend. He's been a friend of mine for years. And back then, when I first started, he was the amateur rep for FootJoy. And I had asked him, who out there in the amateur ranks is cannot miss? I said, who's kind of like the next Tiger or Phil? And he didn't even hesitate. And he said, Will Zalatoris. He said, that kid hits it so good. It's scary. And if you've got a kid like that who's arguably one of the best ball strikers on the tour at that time in the college ranks, not firing at flags, what makes a 4 handicap or a 2 handicap that has a bit of an ego think that they can fire at flags? And the only rational explanation I come up with is guys at that level, or girls, you know, put whatever gender you want to in there, they think that for them to shoot the scores that they would need to win at the highest of levels, that they have to fire at flags. To shoot 66,
have to make birdies.
Yes, you have to make birdies and fire at flags all the time. That's just not how it is. And I think you and Lou and the work at Arcos and a lot of data analysts have shown that's not how it is. And I think it's
not how it is.
Well, I think the ESPN, the top 10 Sports Center, when they used to show the best shots, and then the highlight reels on the Golf Channel show all these players knocking it close. And I've told, after my playing career ended, I would tell students that had that thought process. I said, look, if you're here, go to the RBC Heritage, or if you're from, you know, Akron, go to the Firestone, wherever you're from, go to a tour event and watch some of the players that are struggling to make the cut and watch how crooked they're hitting it. They're not firing at flags. You just can't do it over the course of a year in a 4-day tournament. You're not going to be able to perform. Johnny Miller, again, using a highlight reel, they highlighted his stellar iron striking rounds. Oakmont, of course, we were about Oakmont all the time, and it was, but no one's going to play at that level over the course.
And again, that's why he won by $1 billion. Like, it's like at some point, like anomalies happen. Like you're gonna have a week. Smiley Kaufman's a guy that I got to go down there and talk with. One of the first guys I went down to San Antonio and walked with him. And Smiley basically was just like not really listening to anything I had to say, because he was like, when I won in Vegas, like the research I did on him was, man, he shot like 10 under the 3rd round in Vegas when he won maybe his rookie or sophomore year out there. And the quote after the tournament was, I was firing at every single pin. And then I went and looked at the shot log image and I'm like, I bet you were. And it worked out once. And if you go back to his Corn Ferry year, the prior year, he missed like 35-40% of his cuts and won a couple times. Everybody's always like, I'd rather miss a ton of cuts and win twice. I'm like, that works until you don't win for 2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're right back on a different tour. Like that you will still win. But what's funny to me is that same day, the guy that we were playing with that was paying attention to basically every single word I said and was really locked in, like, this is interesting. Like, I'm curious. That guy's name is Xander Schauffele. If you go to San Antonio, it's probably 2017 or 18, and you look at both of those guys' careers moving forward, like it's an inflection point in Xander's where like he started playing really good effectively immediately, and Smiley just basically nothing changed. He's kept on missing a bunch of cuts, and unfortunately for him, he then went a couple of years without winning. Now you're an announcer. I
Booth. Yep.
mean, super nice guy. I definitely would have a beer with him, had a great time with him, but I was like, not listening to anything I'm saying, and I'm not saying you have to, but I don't know why I'm here. Like, again, this is the arguments I used to get in on Twitter until luckily I punted that pile of garbage. Is we're not guessing. Like, this is a mathematical fact. That's when I argue with Colt Knost during the Masters. He's like, dude, we just have different opinions. I'm like, no, 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 no. You have an opinion. I have data.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you play number 3 at Augusta. You're wrong. And if I'm an asshole for saying you're wrong, like if somebody says 2 + 2 = 5, is the guy who says, no, actually it's 4. Is that guy an asshole or is he just telling the truth? Like, and again, this is where I'm trying to be open with my branch of the spectrum I'm on, and I'm trying to do some work on myself. Like, okay, you could maybe phrase it better, but like at the end of the day, nobody reads multi-tweets. Nobody gets past the first tweet. I
No.
might have 50,000 views on the first tweet and 12,000 on the second and 400 on the third. You better get your point condensed into one tweet, which then means you got to be blunt. And oops.
Well, you have even said, look, that there are parts of people's game, the emotional side that does play a role, whether it's right or wrong. But there's no way to differentiate. There's no way to measure a Phil Mickelson if he would have done this or that, if his career would have been better. And I've got a friend. I know he's probably gonna listen to this because he loves you and he loves Lou, and he's a math teacher. He's a high school math teacher, and we will debate things. And I don't deny the numbers. I know Scott. I've had him on. I know Lou. I've had him on, and now you'll be on twice. But where I like to irritate him just to do it, and he knows that I've done this enough. And he'll do all these numbers because he's got more math degrees than I do. But I say I'll finally ask him when I'm tired of arguing. I say, do you love your wife and your kids? He says, of course I do. Why would you ask such a stupid question? I said, how do you quantify it? And he gets irritated. He just has this look in his face like, I
he could
hate
write
you.
an equation.
He
He could
probably
write an
could.
equation, know where he does.
He
I mean,
probably
again,
could.
they're just variables. They're just inputs. I mean, again, like people are like, you don't sound like much fun at parties. Like, I definitely am learning that my brain doesn't operate in a normal way. But again, this is the one that another announcer really lost it. But every decision you make in life is math based. 100% of decisions you make are based in math, whether you realize it or not. Should I cross the street right now is a math based decision. How big of a hurry am I in? Well, if I need to get to the other side to pick up $5 million and I've got 20 seconds, I might take on a little bit more risk, but I'm certainly not going to go 50-50. Now, there's a lion behind me. Well, it might start dropping to 70%. I'm positive I'm going to get across. But if it's just Sunday afternoon and I'm walking across the street to Target, it's going to be damn near 100% unless I have a stroke if I'm going to try to cross the street. And so that is actually a math-based decision. You're weighing these different things. You're turning them into a basic weighted average math problem. And that's all poker is, and that's technically all Decade is a bunch of weighted average math problems. Your shot pattern in golf is the same thing as the deck of cards in poker. And aside from that, the math is literally identical.
You know Stuart Morgan? He's a coach over in the UK.
Yeah.
Stuart's getting his doctorate in what we're talking about, and I'm going to have him on again. I got to reach out to him. I think he's still partying from the win because he was over in Rome. He's got a number of players on the European side, but he's got to be getting close to finishing now. And we have talked about that. That he's said what Scott and Lou do is great. He said, and he got into the technical medical literature of. I'm going to use a very generic.
There's definitely parts
there's definitely parts that play a role. They're another science. They're the brain science, let's call it, for lack of a better term. But I'd be very interested to hear what he has to say and push the conversation forward, because all of us, no matter what side of the argument we're on, arguing position, I think everybody has the same goal. Say, hey, let's play better. Let's make people better in golf and in life in general. And that's the whole point of this podcast, as I always say in the intro.
I think what a lot of guys, and again, I should not include him in this because I really don't know what he believes. I feel like he's on the random practice side of the fence, though. And a lot of the guys, when I see them making the random versus block practice argument, what I think they get wrong in the I try to be very clear. Like, I don't think there's science that can be done to actually decipher is blocker random practice better for any given. Like, I'm just telling you, here's my experience, and here's where I'm poking a hole in the science they're using. So when they use a kid learned his math problems better by not just doing 4 times 7 and 4 times 7, 4 times 7, and okay, great. I'll give you that that's accurate because the brain has to reorganize and remat. I got it. But in golf, it's just a different sport where the ball, we are the ones starting contact. But most importantly, what's different in golf that makes it different than anything else is it's the only sport that you're not looking at the target
Mm-hmm.
when you do
Or
the
you're performing
act.
the act. Exactly.
Yeah. And so it's just different. And as a result, and I think that way too many people, when they've tried to apply like that, there needs to be more randomness in golf, it's like they're watching someone like me swing. They're like, my God, he's doing the same thing every single time. And it's like, no, I'm not. It probably looks like it, and even most of the golf shots look like it. But my brain is definitely making very subtle changes in every single swing I do. And that negates the value of the study you're trying to show me because my brain's doing that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's for sure doing that too.
Well, we talked about it last time when you were on that it depends on the situation or situational. And the tour pros who are in variable conditions nonstop, when they go home after they take time, they are doing block practice because they're always in variable situations. But your average Joe who beats balls in the range only and then goes and plays once a week, he has very little variable and he's sitting there practicing one thing. It's like, okay, what does the person need? It's like penicillin's great for your if you're sick. Well, unless you're allergic to it. My dad
Yeah.
takes it. He might die because he has a high
Yeah.
allergic to penicillin. So it's like, and we talked about
That's
that
all.
last time.
That's all that I've ever, with that argument, tried to instill is like there's some flaws in what you're saying here, and it's not exactly black and white with
Yes, correct. I
with
agree.
with the with how you can get about this. I mean, that's
And I think you
you
get
know,
tagged wrong, and that everyone's Scott's just about block. It's like no, he's been on my show, and he said it depends on what the person needs, but as a general scope, most people probably need more block practice because they don't know what the hell they're doing.
but again, like subtle change. Like if you're not in a block station when you're hitting balls. And you're not like you're a 10 or higher handicap. I just even honestly, like I know this pisses people off, but like you're a scratch. Like you hit a lot of really bad shots as a scratch. That might just be subtle changes in ball position.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee I drive the ball really well, and I guarantee you my driver is within a half an inch in distance and forward backward ball position every single time I swing. And it's because I've done the same thing a million times. And then back to like fixing Frankie from Barstool. I was just laughing like his ball could be like anywhere in like a 6-inch circle with driver. Well, no wonder you're not consistent. Like it, how do you expect to hit this nail? I mean, when you watch those guys when you're doing like an Instagram and they're all like taking turns hitting the nail, do you think that the time they go to the next railroad tie, they switch positions or they hold the thing differently or they
Throw them
stand?
off.
Like, no,
They'd
they're
be
in
all
the
out of whack.
same spot. This is not eye to hand coordination. This is rote memorization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing the same motion over and over and over again. And I just think that because it's the only sport, again, where you're not looking at the target and ball position plays a huge role in path, it's entirely possible back to back swings are absolutely identical. And with one driver, the ball was 2 inches further back and a little further away. And all of a sudden that hit like a squeezy block cut. It was the same swing. You just caught it in a 2-inch different portion of the arc.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, you think Tiger's ball position is all over the place relative to his intention on any given shot? Like, no, it's exactly where he intends it to be.
We're winding up here. I got to ask you, what updates have been added to Decade, or what are you working on now that's going to make it even better?
I always am trying to make the data entry as easy as possible, and so we created a new strategy focused edition. I mean, again, like you mentioned Arcos earlier, when people talk about like stats, like it's a generic commodity. I mean, strokes gained is strokes. As long as the people have done their math correct, there's no better stats program than another program.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where I do get in trouble is if you think of Decade as only being a stats program, it's pretty damn expensive. But that's why we tried to build in the free yardage books that allow you to go out and if you're a tournament player, you're going to save a couple $100 a year in yardage books easily. But then the strategy focused edition, what I'm really trying to get is I'm still getting to deliver all of the strokes gained stuff, but I'm really have over the last 2 to 4 years have realized, man, this Tiger 5, how many bogeys on par fives, how many three putts, bogeys with 9 iron or less, blown easy saves, and double bogeys. Those 5 things are what we've got to hone in on. I mean, when you finish a round of golf and you think you should have shot lower, it's not because like, oh, my strokes gained approach should have been lower today, should have been better. No, you did one of those 5 things, and those 5 things get totally lost in the data.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just this little pedantic mistake here and there. Obviously, it's going to swing your strokes gained approach 0.05 or something like that. But it's not like if you were minus 0.9 or minus 0.95, that doesn't give you a materially different feeling, except for the fact of whenever you're like, man, I knew I shouldn't be trying to stuff that sand wedge. I came up a little bit short. I was trying to hit it. I was 105. That's my perfect sand wedge. I missed it a little bit. I came up plugged at 99 in the front lip of the bunker and made double. That should have been a flighty gap wedge 30 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the kind of shot that I'm trying to get my players, my members to find. And then the Decade content, I do think that's our, differentiating factors. I'm trying to then teach you what to do about it. Like, I don't know what Arcos or any of the other companies do, but there's no chance they do the Decade content. I mean, it's just no one else can do what we do. I've
got to ask
solved
you
the problem.
one question. After playing this tournament this week, so the course was shorter. Let's say I want to guess about 65 or 600 yards, but they have the greens are very unique in that they have some fingers that stick out, and they're tucking these pins, 4 steps from the edge because you're hitting wedge in. But as I'm playing, the challenging part for me was a lot of these where these pins were tucked, it's downsloping to that pin, and then you don't have much room. You might have 5 steps behind it, and it's 3 from the edge. It's like, well, where do I land this? Because if it hits the downslope and doesn't have enough spin on it, it's over the back. And if I hit it and it does spin and I don't get it over the hill, now I'm coming back 10 feet. Now I've got a 40-footer up and over a mound, down grain, down. It's like drives you nuts. And I'm thinking, I got to ask Scott this week when he comes on.
But what I would always just say is like, what's the alternative? Fire more at the flag and then get yourself more short-sighted? Like,
no,
that's not going to be good either.
It's like, so do you play to just, okay, I'll take my chances I'll hit it to my yardage, and if it catches the slope and bounces along, then okay, I got a chip out of it. That is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I do tell tour players that they can override like 2 or 3 decisions around by 2 or 3 yards. So there might be a couple times where you're like, man, but too often we get like, I don't want to be there, so I'm going to aim away from it. And it's like, well, if you take your shot pattern and the long left is, I don't want to be there, so I shift that to where it's in a spot I don't mind it being. Well, now the short right is probably in just as equally bad as a spot. You're just not seeing it because you're like, I don't want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just really like, I bet that hole played with a high scoring average. I mean, it doesn't sound like an easy hole, and it doesn't sound like everyone else is going to have anything other than the same decision. I don't really take ridges and slopes and greens on greens into consideration. I don't. I think when you do, you wind up making overly, I was going to say conservative or aggressive decisions. Like, so you might get overly aggressive on a shot. So like number 16 at Augusta on Sunday, where the middle of that ridge, the hole's playing 180, Decade baseline number's 9, water's 3 extra. I would be telling you generically to aim 12 yards from the left edge of that green. That's the dead center of that slope.
Mm-hmm.
If that slope were funneling away from the hole, it wouldn't change anything. Like, well, God, I don't want to land in the middle of that slope and it funnel to the right side of the green, so I'm going to aim further left. Well, now you're just going to be putting a bunch of balls in the water. That's worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, like That's really, I think, the best way you can see that analogy easily. Yes, they are using that slope to try to funnel it down towards the hole, but that's just convenient. It's not the point. The point is avoiding the water. The slope just happens to be convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you, if you think of that slope on 16 at Augusta going the other way versus into you, that has to be similar to what you've got going on in your head.
Yeah.
And you've just got to kind of reverse it. Well, would this change anything? Like, well,
No.
that'd be better, but it wouldn't make me change anything.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I've run out of time. I've run over time as usual.
Hey,
But
not a problem,
I
buddy.
appreciate it. Just hang out for a minute as this uploads. But it's always a pleasure to have you on. And next time we'll come on. We'll talk about freedom of choice versus what the opposite.
Perfect.
Be a
Let's
good
do
one.
that.